This moment, we're being joined by Mr. Jay Chabria, who's recently served as the chief strategist and general consultant for Senator J.D. Vance's nationally watched campaign. Is joining us on this broadcast. Mr. Chabria, let me in fact start off by asking you this market volatility that's been witnessed earlier in the morning when the markets opened up. You know, the stocks that are related to Donald Trump's business interests and also Palantir Technologies, that is backed by Peter Thiel, who is also seen as someone who has backed J.D. Vance. They were up pretty dramatically, over 23%, but they've closed in the red. What do you make of the fact that the markets seem to have initially started off with a surge, but then have cooled off on the stocks that back the Trump campaign?
Well, look, I have no idea what the stock markets and how they relate to the election. What I'm pretty confident is that Donald Trump's going to be the next president of the United States, and J.D. Vance will be the next vice president of the United States. And look, there's other indicators that matter a lot more than what the stock market is. I think there's a lot of prognosticators that look at everything from the weather to the stock market to what a college professor in some university says. But when you look at the early voting numbers and you look at the polling numbers and you look at the issues that are driving Americans, it's very clear that the Trump campaign is in the driver's seat for this election.
You mentioned that the Trump campaign is in the driver's seat, and you also want to discount how the stock markets have behaved. But this is about the business sentiment of how people are looking as to what is unfolding at this moment in American politics. But besides that, I also want you to weigh in terms of how the Republicans have gone about this entire election. Donald Trump has said that this is the best presidential campaign that he fought. This is better than 2016. This is better than 2020. But for it to stick, he's got to win this election. And at this moment, it's going right down to the wire. And it'll be down to those few battleground states. Do you think Donald Trump can actually flip some of those battleground states in his favor, especially Pennsylvania?
I do. And look, I've been in all 7 of the battleground states, or I'm sorry, I should say 5 of the 7 battleground states in the last 2 days, flying around on the campaign. And what I can tell you is that the Trump campaign this election cycle, is the strongest campaign by far that they've ever had. They've got a very professional organization. They've got a great message. They've got great rallies, and the support has been tremendous. So I actually think that they're probably the favorite in almost all of the battleground states that you talk about. And look, the battleground states are Georgia, they're North Carolina, Nevada, Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And I think that if you had to look at it, I think they're the favorites in all the states. Michigan's probably the biggest toss-up to me right now, but I think that they can actually have a very good night tonight, and I think it's probably going to win.
Okay, you're saying you're pretty confident that they're going to win. But also let's talk about the message that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have sent out in this case. Now, Kamala Harris has been very strongly out saying that women need to have the choice to get an abortion if they need to. And this really does look like the Achilles heel of the Trump campaign. Now, women are out, they're voting in big numbers. The issue of abortion, the freedom to get a medically assisted abortion if a woman needs it, is something that goes right deep down into the American psyche. And here, do you think Donald Trump and his campaign has been on the back foot?
Well, look, I think that it's been very clear that Donald Trump has said that he supports sending it back to the states. So but we have a federalist election, a federalist type of government in America where states have a lot of say, and every state can have a different policy. I think that's a very clear thing. But when you look at polling, and polling has been very consistent for the last 2 years, there's 2 issues that are driving this election, and that's almost indisputable. One is the economy, and that's inflation, because we've had tremendous inflation in this country because people can't actually afford to put groceries on the table when they could 4 years ago, and that's a big difference between the time Donald Trump was president and where he is now. And the second issue is illegal immigration. We have a tremendously porous southern border where Mexicans and folks from the drug cartel are coming in illegally into America, and that is having a huge effect on the economy and in people's jobs and in the way in which they live all across the country. Those are the 2 issues that drive not just Republicans but independents in this country and some moderate Democrats as well too. Right. And that's why you've seen this race, why you've seen Donald Trump polling so much better than he has in past elections.
Economy seems to be the issue that Donald Trump wants to hit home hard. He believes that this is the issue which will win him this election.
It's not that he believes it. It's not that he believes it. It's also the issue that everyone else believes too. When you look at polls, it's about 35-40% where that's their number one issue, the economy, inflation, jobs. So it's not just his, it's everyone's.
But the thing is, how does Donald Trump intend to actually change and bring about the changes that the American people are expecting of the American economy? A lot of Donald Trump's rhetoric has been about, the balance of payment disadvantage that the United States of America has with China. He wants to increase tariffs with China, with Europe, with other parts of the world. And this has been his pet grievance. But the fact is, if you increase tariffs, that's also going to make things much more expensive for people within the United States. So how do you respond to that?
Well, so there's something that I would tell you is that Donald Trump actually was president 4 years ago, and there were a lot of people, myself included, that were very skeptical of what Donald Trump would be as president. But the fact of the matter is, our prices were lower, the economy was booming, and we were in better shape 4 years ago. And that's what voters will take with them when they go into the voting booth today. As the polls are about to close, they're going to go and say, was I better off 4 years ago, or am I better off today? And it's a pretty clear answer, and I think that that's the fundamental reason that Donald Trump is going to be president. So look, you can say that his policies would increase prices, but there's already evidence of what happened.
If you're putting tariffs on imports that come in from Europe and China, from India, from other places, then that is obviously going to increase prices, which will have to be paid for by the common American people.
Well, there are economists that say that, but there are economists that say the other way too, and especially it depends on your entire macroeconomic plan. And again, Americans have had an opportunity to actually witness what a Donald Trump economic policy would be, and their lives were better, prices were cheaper, and by the way, they were actually putting more pressure on China too, and that's a good thing for America. Look, one of the things that we've had in this country is our manufacturing base has gone overseas, mostly to China, and I think that's something that Trump and Vance want to bring back.
Now, Kamala Harris, all through her campaigning, she said that her way of doing governance would be to provide for the American middle class and the poorer sections of the American society, but taxing the super rich. She said she should tax the super rich so that the benefits of that wealth can be divided much more equitably within the society. Donald Trump has said that he wants to reduce taxes, but what is interesting is that if he's cutting taxes predominantly for the billionaire class. How does that help the common, the middle class, and the poorer sections of the American society?
So I would actually reject the premise of your question. I think that is exactly what Kamala Harris would want to say, but I don't think that's actually.
That is what the Democrats are saying. This is a chart that you have to respond to.
Well, we've responded, and I think the answer is going to be in the ballot box today when Trump and Vance are victorious. I think that's what the answer is going to be. Certainly, the Democrats want that to be the message, but that is not the history of the Trump presidency. He delivered tax cuts for the middle class. He delivered tax cuts for working class people. And what you're seeing in the Republican Party, what is very interesting, is from 20 years ago, it was absolutely the party of the wealthy, and what's happened under Trump is it's become the party of the working class. Union voters, people that are blue collar, that work 9-to-5 jobs, that work in factories, they're coming into the Republican Party in droves, and that's really fundamentally the problem the Democrats have, is that they're losing their base in terms of working class voters, and they're also losing black men too. So look, you actually brought up the gender gap earlier too when you talked about abortion, but the Democrats have a huge problem too with men. Men are leaving the Democratic Party in droves, and so there's a gender gap on both sides certainly, but I think it's going to actually have a bigger effect on the Democrat side than it is the Republican side.
You're candid enough to admit that there is a gender gap, and you're also admitting that more number of men are voting for the Republicans, but is the Republican Party leaving out the other half of the demographic, where it is not catering to women who make up 50% of the society?
Look, there's always been a gender gap in Republican politics, and that's always been something. But what I'm arguing here is that there's a bigger gender gap that's actually that's happening on the Democratic side now too, whereas the Republicans have actually maintained where they have always been, the parity there. So certainly there's a gender gap. That is something that's happening. That's something happening in society in America all across, where there's a cleave in between men and women, and we got to bring that back together. But I really do think that because of the working class values that Republicans are bringing to the party, they're going to bring more women along too, on people that vote on more than just a single issue.
All right, we'll have to leave there. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Jay Chabria, for joining us and getting us that perspective in terms of how you see this election, of course, is panning out. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.